While cleaning the office, the cleaning lady saw the name on a document. She froze when she realized it was the man who left her pregnant 15 years ago. The fluorescent lights hummed their familiar tune as Rachel Hayes pushed her cleaning cart down the marble hallway of the Carter Building's 42nd floor. At 2:17 a.m., Boston's financial district had surrendered to silence, leaving only the night shift workers like herself to inhabit these gleaming towers of power and privilege. Rachel had been cleaning offices for 3 years now, ever since she'd lost her day job at the diner. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady, and more importantly, it allowed her to be home when Sophie got back from school. At 34, she'd learned to swallow her pride and do whatever it took to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. She paused outside the executive suite, fishing for the right key on her heavy ring. The nameplate beside the mahogany door read, Jonathan Carter, President and CEO. Rachel had cleaned this office dozens of times, but she'd never really paid attention to the name. Carter was just another suit to her, another wealthy executive who left coffee rings on expensive furniture and crumpled papers scattered across Persian rugs. The office itself was a monument to success. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Boston Harbor. While oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors watched from gilded frames, Rachel had always wondered what it would feel like to sit behind that massive desk, to make decisions that affected thousands of lives with the stroke of a pen. She started with the trash, emptying the waste baskets with practiced efficiency. Rich people threw away more in a day than she spent on groceries in a week. Designer coffee cups, expensive takeout containers, reports that probably cost more to print than her monthly rent. As she moved to dust the desk, a document caught her eye. It was a contract for some kind of business expansion, thick with legal jargon and corporate speak. But it was the signature at the bottom that made her blood run cold. Jonathan Carter. The name hit her like a physical blow. Rachel's hands began to shake as she stared at the elegant script, memories flooding back with devastating clarity. Jonathan Carter, the same name, the same handwriting she'd once traced with her finger on love letters hidden in her teenage diary. No, she whispered, gripping the edge of the desk. It can't be. But there it was, clear as day. The man whose office she cleaned every night, whose trash she emptied, whose world she inhabited like a ghost. He was him, the Jonathan who had promised her forever under the stars at Harvard's graduation party, the Jonathan who had held her as she told him about the baby, the Jonathan who had vanished without a trace, leaving her 19, pregnant, and utterly alone. Rachel's legs gave out, and she sank into the leather chair behind his desk, the same chair where he sat every day, making millions while she scrubbed floors just floors below. The irony was so cruel it took her breath away. 15 years. 15 years she'd told herself he was probably dead, probably killed in some accident far from Boston. It was easier that way. Easier than imagining he'd simply chosen to abandon her and their unborn child. She'd built an entire mythology around his disappearance. Even told Sophie that her father had died a hero's death rather than admit the truth. That he'd simply vanished when things got complicated. The memories came flooding back now. Unwelcome and vivid. That night at the Beacon Hill mansion where she'd been working as a server for a catering company. She'd been saving money for college, working every party and event she could find. Jonathan had been there with his Harvard friends, all of them in expensive suits and perfectly styled hair. But Jonathan had been different. While his friends had treated the help like furniture, he'd actually talked to her, asked her name, complimented her smile, made her feel like she mattered. When he'd asked for her number at the end of the night, she'd thought it was too good to be true. For 3 magical months, they'd met in secret, coffee shops in Cambridge where no one would recognize him, long walks along the Charles River after midnight, stolen kisses in his car parked behind her apartment building. He'd made her feel like Cinderella, like she was worthy of love from someone who lived in a completely different world. Rachel remembered the night she'd told him about the pregnancy. They'd been in their favorite spot by the river, and she'd been so nervous she could barely speak. But Jonathan had surprised her. He'd held her close, kissed her forehead, and whispered that everything would be okay, that they'd figure it out together. 2 days later, he was gone. No call, no text, no explanation. Just nothing, like he'd never existed at all. Rachel wiped away tears she hadn't realized were falling. All these years, she'd wondered what she'd done wrong. Had she not been pretty enough? Smart enough, worthy enough to keep his attention. Had the baby been too much reality for his fantasy? Now, staring at his signature on documents worth millions, she had her answer. He hadn't died. He hadn't been forced away by circumstances beyond his control. He'd simply chosen his old life over the new one they could have built together. The sound of footsteps in the hallway jolted her back to reality. Rachel quickly wiped her eyes and stood up, her heart pounding. She couldn't be caught in here. Couldn't risk losing this job. Sophie was counting on her. She finished cleaning mechanically, her mind reeling. As she pushed her cart toward the elevator, Rachel caught her reflection in the polished doors. The same face Jonathan had once called beautiful, now worn by years of struggle and single motherhood. The same hands he'd held, now rough from cleaning solutions and hard work. But her eyes burned with something new, something dangerous. By the time Rachel arrived home to their small apartment in Southie, dawn was breaking over Boston. Sophie was still asleep, her textbooks scattered across the kitchen table where she'd been studying the night before. At 15, Sophie was everything Rachel had dreamed of becoming. Brilliant, ambitious, full of hope for the future. Rachel stood in the doorway watching her daughter sleep, remembering all the nights she'd worked double shifts to afford Sophie's school supplies, all the dreams she'd sacrificed to make sure her daughter had every opportunity she'd never had. Sophie stirred, opening eyes that were startlingly blue. Jonathan's eyes, though she'd never known it. "Mom, you're home early." "Couldn't sleep," Rachel lied, forcing a smile. "How was the studying?" "Good, Mrs. Peterson thinks I have a real shot at that scholarship to Cambridge Prep." "Can you imagine, Mom? Me at one of those fancy schools?" Rachel's heart clenched. Cambridge Prep, where the children of Boston's elite learned to take their place in the world, where Jonathan Carter had probably gone to school. You deserve it. Baby, you deserve everything good in this world. And as Sophie smiled and padded off to get ready for school, Rachel made a decision that would change everything. Jonathan Carter thought he could hide in his tower, living his perfect life while she cleaned up his messes in the shadows. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. Rachel stood outside the Carter building at 3:47 p.m., her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd spent the entire day planning what she would say, how she would confront the man who had shattered her world 15 years ago. Now, dressed in her best outfit, a simple black dress she'd bought for Sophie's school interviews, she felt like an imposter trying to infiltrate a world that had never wanted her. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and steel, filled with people in $1,000 suits moving with the confident stride of those who belonged. Rachel's reflection in the polished elevator doors showed a woman who clearly didn't, but she'd come too far to turn back now. "I'm here to see Mr. Carter," she told the receptionist on the 42nd floor, her voice steadier than she felt. The woman, perfectly groomed and probably younger than Rachel, looked her up and down with barely concealed disdain. "Do you have an appointment? Tell him Rachel Hayes is here. He'll see me." Something in Rachel's tone must have convinced her, because the receptionist picked up the phone. "Mr. Carter, there's a Rachel Hayes here to see you." "Yes, sir, of course." She hung up, surprise flickering across her features. "He'll see you now. Last door on the right." Rachel's legs felt like water as she walked down the familiar hallway. How many times had she pushed her cleaning cart past this very door? How many nights had she worked just feet away from the man who had haunted her dreams? She knocked once and entered without waiting for permission. Jonathan Carter stood with his back to her, silhouetted against the floor-to-ceiling windows. At 37, he was even more handsome than she remembered, his dark hair now touched with distinguished silver at the temples. The expensive suit couldn't hide the fact that he'd filled out since college. His shoulders broader, his presence more commanding. When he turned around, the color drained from his face. "Hello, Jonathan." For a moment, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly, his usual composure completely shattered. The coffee mug in his hand slipped, shattering against the marble floor. "Rachel," he whispered. "What? How did you find you?" She stepped closer, noting how he instinctively backed away. "It wasn't hard. I've been cleaning your office for 3 years." The words hit him like a physical blow. "You've been... what?" "Every night, Jonathan. Right here in this room. Emptying your trash, dusting your precious awards, cleaning up your messes. Her voice was calm, but her eyes blazed. Funny how life works out, isn't it? Jonathan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she remembered from their college days. Rachel, this is impossible. You can't be here. But I am here. She moved to his desk, trailing her fingers across the polished surface. Right where you sign all those important documents. Where you make all those important decisions that affect thousands of lives. You need to leave now. His voice was sharper now, the initial shock giving way to something harder. This is inappropriate. I could call security. Rachel laughed, but there was no humor in it. Security, really? That's your solution to everything that makes you uncomfortable. What do you want? The question came out strangled. What do I want? Rachel turned to face him fully. I want to know why, Jonathan. I want to know how you could just disappear like that. I want to know how you could abandon your own child. Child. His face went white. You were pregnant. The genuine shock in his voice made her falter for a moment. You knew I was pregnant. I told you that night by the river. You held me and said everything would be okay. Jonathan shook his head slowly. No, that's not. You never told me about any pregnancy. Don't you dare lie to me. The words exploded out of her. Don't you dare stand there in your perfect office and pretend you don't remember. You held me while I cried. You promised we'd figure it out together. I swear to you. Rachel, I never knew about any baby. His voice was desperate now. If I had known. What? You would have done the right thing. You would have married the poor girl and lived happily ever after. She shook her head. We both know better than that. Jonathan moved to his desk, pulling out his checkbook with shaking hands. How much? Whatever you need for the child, college, living expenses, anything. Rachel stared at him in disbelief. You think this is about money? Isn't it? He was writing already, his pen scratching across the check. $1 million, $2 million, name your price. The check fluttered to the floor as Rachel slapped it out of his hand. I don't want your money, Jonathan. I want you to acknowledge her. I want you to be a father to Sophie. Sophie? He repeated the name like it was foreign. She's, how old? 15, brilliant, beautiful, everything you could want in a daughter. She thinks you're dead. The words hung in the air between them like a curse. Jonathan sank into his chair, his face in his hands. She thinks I'm dead, he repeated. It was easier than explaining that her father was a coward who ran away when things got complicated. Before Jonathan could respond, the office door opened and a woman walked in. She was tall, blonde, and stunning in the way only money could buy. Her Chanel suit probably cost more than Rachel made in 6 months. Darling, I was in the neighborhood and thought we could. The woman stopped when she saw Rachel, her perfect features freezing into a mask of polite confusion. I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were in a meeting. Amanda. Jonathan stood quickly, his composure snapping back into place like armor. This is Rachel Hayes. She's a former employee. Amanda Collins Carter extended a manicured hand, her smile never reaching her ice-blue eyes. A pleasure. I'm Amanda Carter, Jonathan's wife. The word wife hit Rachel like a physical blow. Of course he was married. Of course he'd found someone suitable, someone from his own world who wouldn't complicate his perfect life. Wife, Rachel repeated, shaking the offered hand. How wonderful. How long have you been married? 10 years next month, Amanda replied, moving to Jonathan's side with practiced ease. We met at the Hamptons. Our families have been friends for generations. Rachel nodded, understanding flooding through her. A marriage of convenience, of social standing and shared bank accounts. Nothing like the messy, passionate love they'd shared all those years ago. Congratulations, she said, her voice steady despite the churning in her stomach. I hope you're very happy together. We are, Amanda said firmly, her arm linking through Jonathan's. Aren't we, darling? Jonathan's eyes met Rachel's over his wife's perfectly styled head. For a moment, she saw a flicker of the boy she'd once loved, lost and desperate. Then the mask slipped back into place. Of course, he said. Very happy. Rachel picked up her purse, suddenly exhausted. Well, I should go. I have to get home to my daughter. Your daughter. Amanda's voice was sharp with interest. How lovely is she in school here in Boston? She is. Very bright girl. Takes after her father, I'm told." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Amanda's grip on Jonathan's arm tightened almost imperceptibly. "Well," Rachel continued, "I should let you two get back to your perfect life. Don't worry, Jonathan. I won't be bothering you again." She was at the door when his voice stopped her. "Rachel, wait!" She turned, hope fluttering treacherously in her chest. "The cleaning company you work for. I'll make sure they reassign you. Somewhere else." The hope died as quickly as it had been born. "Of course you will. Can't have the help making you uncomfortable." And with that, she walked out, leaving behind the man who had once been her whole world and was now just another stranger in an expensive suit. Sophie Hayes had never seen anything like Cambridge Preparatory Academy as she walked through the wrought iron gates for her scholarship interview. She felt like Alice stepping through the looking glass into a world she'd only read about in books. The campus sprawled across perfectly manicured grounds, with ivy-covered brick buildings that whispered of centuries of tradition and privilege. Students lounged on emerald lawns, their uniforms crisp and expensive, their laughter carrying the confidence of those who'd never doubted their place in the world. Sophie Hayes, a woman in pearls and a navy blazer, approached with a clipboard. "I'm Mrs. Whitman, the admissions coordinator, ready for your interview." Sophie nodded, smoothing down her best dress, the same one her mother had worn to parent-teacher conferences for the past 3 years. It was clean and pressed, but it felt inadequate surrounded by all this understated wealth. The interview went better than she'd dared hope. Her grades spoke for themselves, and her essay about overcoming economic hardship had clearly made an impression. When Mrs. Whitman smiled and said they'd have an answer within the week, Sophie felt a flutter of genuine hope. Walking back through campus, she found herself imagining what it would be like to belong here, to study in those beautiful libraries, to join clubs and societies, to be surrounded by other students who actually cared about learning. "You look lost," a voice said behind her. Sophie turned to find a boy about her age with sandy hair and kind eyes. His uniform fit perfectly, and she noticed the subtle details that marked him as money: the Swiss watch, the Italian leather shoes, the easy confidence in his posture. "Not lost," she replied. "Just taking it all in." "First time here?" He fell into step beside her. "I'm Marcus, by the way. Marcus Wellington. Sophie Hayes. And yeah, first time. I'm here for a scholarship interview." If he was surprised or put off by the word scholarship, he didn't show it. "Cool. What's your focus?" "Literature and history. Maybe pre-law eventually." She paused. "What about you?" "Business, I guess. Family tradition." He gestured toward a cluster of impressive buildings. "My dad went here, my grandfather, great-grandfather. The Wellington name is on half the buildings." Sophie felt the familiar weight of not belonging, but Marcus seemed genuinely interested in talking to her. As they walked, she found herself relaxing, forgetting for a moment the vast difference in their circumstances. "The library here is incredible," Marcus was saying. "First editions, manuscripts you can't find anywhere else. If you get in, I'll show you around." "If I get in," Sophie repeated. "It's a long shot. Hey, if they're interviewing you, you've got a real chance. They don't waste time on maybes." Meanwhile, across town, Rachel was starting her new assignment at the Meridian building. Jonathan had been true to his word. The cleaning company had reassigned her within 24 hours of their confrontation. No explanation, just a new building and a significantly longer commute. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was still cleaning up after the wealthy elite, just in a different building. The work was the same: emptying trash, dusting offices, vacuuming carpets. But now she had to take 2 buses to get there, adding an extra hour each way to her already exhausting schedule. Her phone buzzed as she pushed her cart down the hallway. "Mom," Sophie's excited voice filled her ear. "You'll never guess where I am." "Where, baby?" "Cambridge Prep. I just finished my interview." "And Mom, this place is incredible. There's a library that looks like something out of Harry Potter, and the students actually seem excited about learning." Rachel smiled despite her exhaustion. "How did the interview go?" "I think it went well. Really well, Mrs. Whitman seemed impressed, and she said they'd have an answer soon." Sophie's voice dropped. "Mom, what if I actually get in? The tuition is fully covered, but there are still expenses. Uniforms, books, activities. Don't worry about that. Rachel said quickly. "If you get in, we'll figure it out. I'll pick up extra shifts, do whatever it takes. I met this boy, Marcus Wellington. His family practically built this place. But he was really nice to me. Didn't act weird when I mentioned the scholarship." Rachel's stomach tightened. Wellington. Another Boston blue blood family name. Another reminder of the world Sophie was trying to enter. A world where her daughter would always be the outsider looking in. "That's nice, honey. Just remember." "I know, Mom. Remember where I come from. Don't try to be something I'm not." Sophie's voice carried a note of mild exasperation. "You've only told me 1,000 times." After they hung up, Rachel continued her work. But her mind was spinning. If Sophie got into Cambridge Prep, she'd be thrown into direct contact with Boston's elite. The same families who'd raised Jonathan, who'd shaped him into the kind of man who could abandon a pregnant 19-year-old without a second thought. Across town, in her pristine Beacon Hill townhouse, Amanda Carter was having a very different kind of evening. She sat in her perfectly appointed study, nursing a glass of wine and staring at her laptop screen. Jonathan's behavior after that woman's visit had been unsettling. He'd been distracted, jumpy, checking his phone constantly when she'd asked about the former employee. He'd brushed off her questions with uncharacteristic dismissiveness. Amanda hadn't built her life on accepting dismissive answers. A few strategic phone calls to the right people had yielded interesting information. Rachel Hayes, 34, single mother, worked for premium cleaning services. No criminal record, no red flags. Just another working-class woman trying to get by. But there was something about the way Jonathan had looked at her, something familiar and dangerous, that Amanda recognized all too well. She'd seen that look once before, years ago, when Jonathan had returned from Harvard changed, distracted, talking about finding himself and questioning everything. That phase had ended abruptly when his father had threatened to cut him off entirely. Jonathan had snapped back to reality, proposed to Amanda within 6 months, and they'd been living their carefully orchestrated life ever since. But tonight, that same restless energy was back, and Amanda wasn't about to let some cleaning woman destroy everything she'd worked so hard to build. She reached for her phone and dialed a familiar number. "Reynolds Investigation Services. This is Amanda Carter. I need a comprehensive background check on someone." Back at the Meridian building, Rachel was finishing up her shift when her phone rang again. Mom! Sophie's voice was breathless with excitement. "I got it. I got the scholarship." Rachel nearly dropped her cleaning supplies. "What? Are you sure?" Mrs. Whitman just called. "Full scholarship to Cambridge Prep. Starting Monday, Mom. I can't believe it. I'm actually going to go to school with some of the smartest kids in Boston." Rachel leaned against the wall, overwhelmed by a mixture of pride and terror. This was everything she'd dreamed of for Sophie, but it was also dangerous in ways her daughter couldn't possibly understand. "Mom, are you there? Aren't you excited?" "I'm thrilled, baby. So proud of you." And she was. Sophie had earned this through her own intelligence and hard work. "We'll celebrate when I get home, okay? Ice cream from that fancy place you like. Actually, I might be a little late, Marcus. The boy I met today. He invited me to meet some of his friends. They're all Cambridge Prep students, and he thought it would help me get oriented before Monday." Rachel's heart clenched. It was starting already. Sophie being drawn into a world where her mother would always be an embarrassment, a reminder of poverty and struggle that didn't fit the narrative these kids told themselves about merit and success. "Just be careful, okay? And be home by 10. "I will, love you, Mom." As Rachel gathered her supplies and headed for the bus stop, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. Sophie was about to enter Jonathan's world, the world that had rejected Rachel 15 years ago. The question was, what would happen when that world discovered who Sophie really was? The call from Reynolds Investigation Services came at 7:43 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Amanda Carter set down her coffee cup with deliberate precision as she listened to the detective's findings, her manicured fingers tapping against the marble countertop in a rhythm that would have warned anyone who knew her well. "You're absolutely certain?" she asked, her voice deceptively calm. "Yes, ma'am. Rachel Hayes gave birth to a daughter on March 15th. 15 years ago. Sophie Elizabeth Hayes. No father listed on the birth certificate. But the timing." Detective Reynolds paused. "Mrs. Carter, Are you sure you want me to continue? Tell me everything. The timeline matches perfectly with when your husband was at Harvard. There are also other connections. The girl just received a full scholarship to Cambridge Preparatory Academy. She's exceptionally bright. Straight A's, off-the-charts test scores, and Mrs. Carter, yes, she has your husband's eyes. Blue, very distinctive. If you want DNA confirmation, I can arrange. That won't be necessary. Amanda ended the call and sat in the pristine silence of her kitchen, watching the morning light stream through custom-designed windows that had cost more than most people made in a year. 15 years. For 15 years, she'd lived with the secret knowledge that her husband had never truly belonged to her, that some part of him had been left behind with memories she could never compete with. She'd suspected there had been someone during his Harvard days, someone who had made him question everything about his predetermined path, now that someone had a name and a daughter. Amanda's phone buzzed with a text from Jonathan. Running late. Board meeting moved to 9. Don't wait up tonight. She stared at the message, noting the distance in even these few words. Ever since that woman's visit, Jonathan had been different, distracted, guilty. Well, 2 could play that game. 3 floors down in the Carter Building's executive level, Jonathan Carter stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office, but he wasn't seeing the Boston skyline. Instead, he kept picturing Rachel's face during their confrontation, the way her voice had broken when she'd said their daughter thought he was dead. Sophie. The name had been echoing in his mind for days. He'd tried to focus on quarterly reports and board meetings, but every quiet moment brought the same devastating realization. He had a daughter, a 15-year-old daughter who was brilliant and beautiful, and had grown up believing her father was dead rather than simply absent. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Carter, your 9 a.m. is here. Send them in." But instead of the expected board members, Amanda walked through his door. She was stunning as always in a way that belonged on magazine covers. Perfectly styled blonde hair, a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and an expression that made Jonathan's blood run cold. "We need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her with deliberate precision. "Amanda, I have a meeting. Cancel it." She moved to his desk with the fluid grace of a predator. "Sit down." "Jonathan." Something in her tone made him comply. Amanda had always been coolly controlled, but there was something different now, something dangerous beneath her polished surface. "I know about the girl," she said without preamble. Jonathan's carefully constructed composure cracked. "What girl?" "Don't insult my intelligence, Sophie Hayes. Your daughter." The words fell like stones into still water. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out? That I'd simply accept your ridiculous story about a former employee?" Jonathan's mouth went dry. "Amanda, I can explain." "Explain what? That you had an affair in college? That you got some waitress pregnant and abandoned her?" Amanda's voice remained level, but her eyes blazed with cold fury. "Or perhaps you'd like to explain why I had to learn about my husband's bastard child from a private investigator." "It wasn't like that." The words came out strangled. "I didn't know about the pregnancy. Rachel never told me." "Oh, please." Amanda's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "You expect me to believe that this woman carried your child for 9 months, gave birth, and raised her for 15 years without once trying to contact you, without once asking for support?" Jonathan ran his hands through his hair, a gesture Amanda had always found juvenile. "I swear to you, I had no idea. If I had known." "What? You would have married her instead of me? Thrown away everything your family built for a moment of college passion?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with 15 years of marriage built on compromise and social expectations rather than love. "No," Jonathan said finally. "No, I would have done the right thing. Supported them. Been present. How noble of you." Amanda's smile was razor thin. "And what exactly do you plan to do now that your little secret has crawled out of the shadows?" Before Jonathan could answer, Amanda's phone chimed. She glanced at it, and her smile became genuinely predatory. "How interesting, it seems your daughter just started at Cambridge Preparatory Academy. Full scholarship, no less. Such a remarkable coincidence that she's now attending school with the children of Boston's finest families." Jonathan's blood turned to ice. "How do you know that?" I make it my business to know everything that could affect our family's reputation. And Jonathan, this affects everything. Across town, Rachel was discovering that her new assignment came with unexpected opportunities. The Meridian building housed several major law firms, and lawyers, it turned out, were remarkably careless with confidential documents. She'd started noticing the pattern during her second week: papers left on desks, file cabinets left unlocked, passwords written on sticky notes attached to computer monitors. Most of it was mundane: divorce proceedings, contract disputes, nothing that interested her. But tonight was different. Tonight, she was cleaning the office of Patterson, Marsh & Associates, the law firm that handled corporate acquisitions for several major Boston companies. And tonight, someone had left a file cabinet wide open with a folder marked Carter Enterprises, Confidential, sitting right on top. Rachel knew she should just close the cabinet and move on. This wasn't her business, wasn't her fight. But the memory of Jonathan's cold dismissal, the way he'd had her reassigned like she was nothing more than an inconvenience, made her pause. She glanced around the empty office, then carefully opened the folder. What she found made her heart race. Financial records showing offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, transaction records that didn't match the company's public filings, email printouts discussing payments to shell companies that existed only on paper. Rachel wasn't a lawyer or an accountant, but she'd watched enough news to recognize money laundering when she saw it. Jonathan's pristine corporate empire was built on foundations that wouldn't survive close scrutiny. She quickly photographed the most damaging documents with her phone, her hands shaking as she worked. This was insurance, she told herself. Protection for Sophie in case Jonathan tried to make their lives more difficult. But even as she carefully replaced the documents and closed the file cabinet, Rachel knew she was crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Sophie's first week at Cambridge Prep had been a whirlwind of new experiences. The classes were challenging in ways she'd never imagined. The other students were brilliant and articulate, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Marcus Wellington had been true to his word, introducing her to his circle of friends and helping her navigate the complex social dynamics of the school. There was Chloe Hartwell, whose father was a federal judge, David Chen, whose family owned half the restaurants in Chinatown, and Emily Foster, whose mother was a renowned surgeon at Mass General. They were all friendly enough, but Sophie couldn't shake the feeling that she was performing in a play where everyone else knew the script. Their casual references to family vacations in Aspen, summer homes on Martha's Vineyard, and parents who were friends with various celebrities made her acutely aware of the gulf between their worlds. "So what does your dad do?" Chloe asked during lunch on Friday. The question delivered with the casual entitlement of someone who'd never had to worry about whether there would be enough money for groceries. Sophie's carefully prepared answer died in her throat. He died when I was little." The table fell silent for a moment, and Sophie saw something flicker across their faces. Pity mixed with discomfort. Death was messy, unpredictable, not something that fit neatly into their ordered world. "I'm sorry," Marcus said quietly. "That must have been really hard." "It was, but my mom is amazing. She's worked really hard to make sure I could have opportunities like this." "What kind of work does she do?" Emily asked, and Sophie caught the subtle note of calculation in her voice. This was the moment Sophie had been dreading, the moment when her carefully constructed facade would crumble. "She works nights," Sophie said carefully, "cleaning offices." The silence stretched longer this time. Sophie watched their faces, seeing the subtle recalibration as they processed this information, as they mentally moved her from "one of us" to "charity case." But it was Marcus who surprised her, leaning forward with genuine interest. "That's really cool, actually. I mean, your mom must be incredibly strong to work that hard for you, and you're here on full scholarship. That's amazing." The moment passed. The conversation moved on. But Sophie carried the weight of that revelation with her for the rest of the day. She belonged here academically, but socially, that was going to be much more complicated. As she waited for the bus home, another reminder of the differences between her and her classmates with their private drivers, Sophie found herself wondering about her father for the first time in years. What would he have thought of her scholarship? Would he have been proud? She'd stopped asking her mother about him long ago, seeing how the questions caused pain. Her mom tried hard to hide, but lately, surrounded by all these kids with their powerful, successful fathers, Sophie found herself curious about the man who had supposedly died a hero's death when she was too young to remember. What she didn't know was that her father was very much alive, sitting in an office just 15 minutes away, staring at a photograph of her that Amanda had provided, and trying to reconcile the brilliant young woman in the picture with the baby he'd never known existed. Amanda Carter had always believed that the best defense was a devastating offense. Standing in her walk-in closet, selecting the perfect outfit for what she privately called Operation Scorched Earth, she felt the familiar thrill of a predator preparing to strike. The black Armani suit was perfect, elegant enough for her lunch meeting with the bored wives, severe enough to send a message. She paired it with her grandmother's pearl necklace, a family heirloom that whispered old money, an unshakable social position. Rachel Hayes had made a critical error in judgment by confronting Jonathan directly. The woman clearly didn't understand the rules of engagement in this world, didn't realize that true power was wielded quietly, through carefully placed phone calls and strategic social maneuvering. Amanda's first call was to Margaret Whitman at Cambridge Preparatory Academy. "Margaret, darling. It's Amanda Carter." "Yes. Jonathan and I are well, thank you for asking. Actually, I'm calling about a student who just received a scholarship, Sophie Hayes." "Oh, you remember her. Wonderful. Well, I've discovered some rather concerning information about the family situation." The conversation was masterfully orchestrated. Amanda never said anything directly actionable. She was far too smart for that. Instead, she planted seeds of doubt about Sophie's stability and appropriateness for the Cambridge prep environment. She mentioned concerns about the mother's lifestyle choices and questioned whether the family could truly afford the additional expenses that came with attending such a prestigious institution. "I'm not suggesting anything drastic," Amanda concluded, her voice dripping with false concern. "But perhaps the school should keep a closer eye on the situation, for the girl's own good, you understand." By the time she hung up, Amanda was certain that Sophie Hayes would find her scholarship experience significantly less comfortable. Her second call was to Jonathan's office. "Cancel whatever meetings my husband has this afternoon. He's taking me to lunch at the Beacon Club." "Yes, I know he's busy. Tell him it's urgent." Rachel discovered the escalation during her lunch break on Wednesday. She'd taken the bus to Cambridge Prep to drop off Sophie's forgotten textbook when she ran into Mrs. Whitman in the parking lot. "Ms. Hayes." The woman's voice was noticeably cooler than during Sophie's scholarship interview. "I was hoping to speak with you. Is everything all right? How is Sophie adjusting?" "That's precisely what I wanted to discuss." Mrs. Whitman's smile was professionally polite, but strained. "Some concerns have been raised about Sophie's circumstances, the additional financial pressures of attending our institution, the impact of your work schedule on her studies." Rachel felt ice forming in her stomach. "What kind of concerns?" "Sophie's grades are excellent and she's never missed an assignment." "Of course, and Sophie is a remarkable young woman, but we've received some information suggesting that the family situation might be more complicated than initially presented." "What information? From whom?" Mrs. Whitman's expression became carefully neutral. "I'm not at liberty to say, but perhaps it would be best if we scheduled a meeting to discuss Sophie's continued enrollment, to ensure we're providing the best possible support for her unique needs." Rachel understood the subtext perfectly. Someone had called the school, someone with enough influence to make the administration question a scholarship student's place at their institution. "There's nothing complicated about our situation," Rachel said firmly. "I work hard to support my daughter. Sophie has earned her place here through her own merit. If someone has told you otherwise, they're lying." "Of course," Mrs. Whitman replied, but her tone suggested she'd already made up her mind. "We'll be in touch about that meeting." As Rachel watched the woman walk away, she felt fury building in her chest. Jonathan. It had to be Jonathan. Or more likely, his perfect wife who couldn't stand the thought of their pristine world being contaminated by the existence of an inconvenient child. That evening, Rachel was cleaning the Meridian building when she noticed them. Two men in expensive suits who moved with the predatory grace of people accustomed to intimidating others. They were waiting by her bus stop when she finished her shift at 3 a.m. "Ms. Hayes." The taller one stepped forward as she approached. "We'd like to have a word." Rachel's hand tightened on her purse strap. "I'm sorry. Do I know you? We represent certain interests that would prefer to avoid complications. You've been making some people very uncomfortable lately." "I haven't been making anyone uncomfortable. I've been working and taking care of my daughter," the second man spoke up, his voice carrying a slight Boston accent that sounded more working class than his partner's. "See, that's where you're wrong. Your little visit to the Carter building has caused some problems that could get much worse if you don't start making better choices." Rachel looked around the empty street, calculating distances to the nearest well-lit areas. "Are you threatening me?" "We're offering friendly advice," the tall one said. "Boston's a big city. Lots of opportunities for a woman with your skills. Maybe it's time you considered relocating. You and your daughter. And if I don't," the men exchanged glances. "Let's just say that Cambridge Prep can be a very challenging environment for students who don't quite fit in. Be a shame if your daughter's scholarship got reevaluated due to, say, behavioral concerns or academic struggles." The threat was clear, and Rachel felt her carefully controlled composure snap. "Get away from me," she said, her voice deadly quiet. "And if you or anyone you work for comes near my daughter, I will destroy you." The shorter man laughed. "Big words from a cleaning lady." Rachel smiled, and something in that smile made both men take a step back. "You have no idea what this cleaning lady is capable of. Tell Jonathan Carter that if he wants a war, he's got one." The next morning, Rachel called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Instead of cleaning offices, she spent the day at the Boston Public Library, using their computers to research everything she could find about Carter Enterprises. What she discovered was a web of shell companies, offshore accounts, and financial maneuvers that painted a picture of systematic tax evasion and money laundering. The documents she'd photographed were just the tip of the iceberg, but more importantly, she found something else. Carter Enterprises was currently under consideration for a massive federal contract worth over $200 million, a contract that would evaporate instantly if the company's financial irregularities came to light. Rachel spent the afternoon crafting carefully worded emails to several investigative journalists, outlining her concerns about Carter Enterprises' business practices and attaching copies of the documents she'd obtained. She didn't send them, not yet, but they were ready, sitting in her drafts folder like loaded weapons. Her phone rang as she was leaving the library. "Mom," Sophie's voice was strained. "Can you pick me up from school? Something happened." Rachel's blood turned to ice. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine, but someone said they saw you talking to reporters about Cambridge Prep. About me, Mom. People are starting to look at me differently and I don't understand what's going on." The rumor mill had started, Rachel realized. Amanda Carter was good. Very good. Instead of directly attacking Sophie, she was poisoning the well, making the other students and their families suspicious of the scholarship girl whose mother was causing problems. "I'll be right there, baby. Don't listen to anything anyone says, okay? We'll talk when I get there." But as Rachel rushed to catch the bus to Cambridge, she knew the conversation she was about to have with her daughter would change everything. Sophie was about to learn that the world she'd dreamed of entering came with a price that neither of them had been prepared to pay. At the Beacon Club, Jonathan stared across the table at his wife, barely touching his meal. Amanda had been describing her day with careful precision, outlining each strategic move in her campaign against Rachel and Sophie without ever explicitly admitting to orchestrating anything. "The girl simply doesn't belong there," Amanda was saying, cutting her salmon with surgical precision. "Cambridge Prep has a reputation to maintain. Surely the administration will realize that scholarship students need to meet certain standards. Leave her alone." "Amanda," the words came out harder than Jonathan had intended. Around them, the refined murmur of Boston's elite continued, but their table had gone silent. "Excuse me," Amanda's voice was dangerously quiet. "Sophie, leave her out of this. Whatever issues you have with Rachel, the girl doesn't deserve to be punished for them." Amanda set down her fork with deliberate care. "That girl is your bastard child, Jonathan. Her very existence is a threat to everything we've built. If you think I'm going to stand by and watch her destroy our family's reputation, she's 15 years old. She's a reminder of your betrayal. Every day she attends that school. Every moment she breathes the same air as our social circle. She announces to the world that you couldn't keep your pants zipped in college." The venom in Amanda's voice was startling in its intensity. Jonathan had always known their marriage was more business arrangement than love affair, but he'd never seen this level of naked hatred from her before. "I won't let you destroy a child to protect your pride," Amanda leaned forward, her smile sharp as a blade. You don't have a choice, darling. This is war now, and in war, there are always casualties. The question is whether you want to be on the winning side or join the collateral damage. As she signaled for the check, Jonathan realized that 15 years of marriage had made him forget who Amanda really was beneath the perfect facade. He was remembering now, and the realization terrified him. The game had changed, and the stakes were higher than any of them had imagined. Sophie had always prided herself on being observant, on picking up the subtle currents that flowed beneath the surface of human interaction. But nothing had prepared her for the psychological warfare that was Cambridge Preparatory Academy when you'd been marked as an outsider. It started small, conversations that stopped when she approached, invitations that weren't extended, study groups that somehow forgot to include her. Sophie told herself she was being paranoid, that she was looking for problems that didn't exist, but then came the whispers. I heard her mother is some kind of activist, Chloe Hartwell murmured to Emily Foster as Sophie passed their lockers, causing trouble for important families. My dad says scholarship students always have issues, David Chen added. Chip on their shoulder, you know, like the world owes them something. Sophie kept walking, her face burning, but inside she was dying a little with each cruel word. These were the same kids who'd welcomed her just weeks ago, who'd made her feel like she finally belonged somewhere. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon in advanced literature. Mrs. Patterson was discussing college preparatory strategies when she addressed the class with carefully neutral words that felt like a public execution. As we prepare for your futures, it's important to remember that academic achievement, while crucial, is only part of what elite universities look for. Character, family background, and social stability all play significant roles in admissions decisions. Sophie felt every eye in the room turn toward her. The message was clear. You might be smart, but you'll never really be one of us. After class, Marcus Wellington caught up with her in the hallway. He'd been distant lately, and Sophie suspected his parents had said something about his association with the scholarship girl. Sophie, wait up. She turned, hoping against hope that he was going to offer support, friendship, anything to make her feel less alone in this beautiful, hostile place. Look, I wanted to talk to you about what people are saying. What are people saying? Marcus, he shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet her eyes. There are rumors that your mom is trying to cause problems for some families. Important families. My parents think maybe it would be better if we kept some distance, just until things settle down. The rejection hit Sophie like a physical blow. Marcus had been her anchor in this new world, the one person who'd made her feel welcome, despite the vast differences in their backgrounds. So you're dropping me because of gossip, because your parents told you to. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. Sophie's voice was rising, drawing stares from other students. You're all such cowards. You act like you're so much better than everyone else, but you're just scared little kids who do whatever your parents tell you. She turned and walked away, leaving Marcus standing in the hallway with his mouth open. But the damage was done. By the end of the day, everyone would know that Sophie Hayes had lost it and confirmed everything they'd whispered about scholarship students not belonging. That afternoon, Sophie sat in the school's garden, hidden behind a cluster of oak trees where she could cry without being seen. She was supposed to be in study hall, but she couldn't face another hour of sideways glances and whispered conversations. Sophie. She looked up to find an elegant woman in a cream-colored Chanel suit standing a few feet away. The woman was beautiful in that effortless way that came from good genes and better money. Her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the October wind. I'm sorry. Do I know you? I'm Amanda Carter, the woman said, sitting gracefully on the bench beside Sophie. I believe you know my husband, Jonathan. He's mentioned you. Sophie's heart began to race. Carter, as in the Carter Building, the Carter Foundation, the name that appeared on half the buildings in Boston. This was the kind of woman her mother warned her about, the kind who smiled while sliding a knife between your ribs. I don't think I know your husband, Sophie said carefully. Oh, but you do. Amanda's smile was perfectly pleasant and absolutely terrifying. In fact, you have quite a lot in common with him, more than you know. I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter, but I think you have me confused with someone else. Amanda reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph. It was old, college-aged, showing a young man with dark hair and startlingly blue eyes. Eyes that Sophie recognized because she saw them in the mirror every morning. "This is my husband at Harvard, about 16 years ago. Handsome, wasn't he? Very popular with the local girls?" Sophie stared at the photograph, her world tilting sideways. "I don't understand." "Oh, I think you do." Amanda's voice was still pleasant, still perfectly controlled. "You have his eyes, dear. Quite unmistakable once you know what to look for." The words hit Sophie like a sledgehammer. Her father, her dead hero father, was alive. Not only alive, but married to this woman, living in a world of unimaginable privilege while Sophie and her mother struggled to pay rent. "No," Sophie whispered. "That's not... My father died when I was little. Did he? Or is that just what your mother told you?" Amanda leaned closer, her perfume expensive and suffocating. "Tell me, Sophie, have you ever seen a death certificate? A grave? Any proof that your father actually died?" Sophie's mind raced through 15 years of memories, searching for any tangible evidence of her father's death. There had been no funeral, no grave to visit, no relatives from his side, just her mother's pain whenever the subject came up. Pain that Sophie had interpreted as grief, but now realized might have been something else entirely. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know the truth. Your father abandoned you, Sophie. He abandoned your mother when she was pregnant, and chose a life of wealth and privilege instead of taking responsibility for his actions." The cruelty of the revelation was breathtaking. Not just that her father was alive, but that he'd chosen to stay away, that he'd built a life just miles from where she'd grown up, never once trying to find her or help them. "He doesn't know," Sophie said desperately. "He can't know about me, or he would have." "Oh, but he does know." Amanda's smile widened. "Your mother went to see him a few weeks ago, told him all about you. And do you know what he did? He had her fired from her job, sent men to threaten her. He wants nothing to do with either of you." The lies mixed with just enough truth to be devastating. Sophie felt something inside her chest breaking, a fundamental trust in the world that she'd never even realized she'd possessed. "You're lying." "Am I? Then ask your mother. Ask her why she really got reassigned to a different building. Ask her who those men were who visited her at the bus stop. Ask her why she's been so stressed lately, so worried about money." Each question hit its mark with surgical precision. Sophie had noticed her mother's increased anxiety, the late-night phone calls, the way she'd been working extra shifts. She'd assumed it was just the usual financial pressure. But now, "Why are you doing this?" Sophie's voice was barely a whisper. "Because I believe in honesty, dear, and because you're attending my children's school now, moving in their social circles. It's only fair that everyone knows exactly who you are." Amanda stood, smoothing down her skirt with practiced elegance. "Your father is Jonathan Carter, Sophie, one of the most powerful men in Boston, and he wants absolutely nothing to do with you." She walked away, leaving Sophie alone in the garden with the ruins of her entire world scattered around her feet. Sophie didn't remember the bus ride home. She moved through the motions mechanically, gathering her things, walking to the stop, finding a seat in the back where no one would see her tears. The city passed by in a blur of gray buildings and gray sky that matched the numbness spreading through her chest. When she reached their apartment, Rachel was in the kitchen, still in her work clothes from her day job at the diner she'd picked up to supplement the cleaning work. "Hey baby, how was school?" Sophie looked at her mother, really looked at her, saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the worry lines that had deepened over the past few weeks, the way her hands shook slightly as she stirred pasta sauce on their ancient stove. "Mom," Sophie said quietly, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." Something in her tone made Rachel turn around, spatula still in hand. "What is it, sweetheart? Is my father alive?" The spatula clattered to the floor. Rachel's face went white, then red, then white again. In that moment of shock and recognition, Sophie had her answer. "Sophie, where is this coming from? Is he alive?" Sophie's voice was stronger now, edged with a fury she'd never felt before. "Did you lie to me my entire life about my father being dead?" Rachel's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. It's complicated. Is he alive? The question hung between them like a loaded gun. Rachel looked at her daughter, this brilliant, beautiful girl who'd trusted her completely for 15 years, and realized that the safe world she'd built with careful lies and protective silences was finally crumbling. "Yes," she whispered. "He's alive." Sophie nodded once, as if confirming something she'd already known. Then she turned and walked to her room, closing the door with a soft click that sounded like the end of everything. Rachel stood alone in the kitchen, pasta sauce burning on the stove, and wondered how Amanda Carter had found her daughter and what other weapons she was preparing to deploy in this war that was destroying the only thing in the world that mattered to her. Sophie didn't come out of her room for dinner. Rachel knocked gently at first, then more insistently, but was met only with silence that felt more devastating than screaming would have been. Through the thin apartment walls, she could hear her daughter crying. Deep, soul-wrenching sobs that cut through Rachel's heart like broken glass. "Sophie, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" The voice that came through the door was hoarse and hollow. "Explain how you lied to me every single day of my life. Explain how you let me grow up thinking my father was some kind of hero who died protecting people." Rachel pressed her forehead against the door, tears streaming down her face. "I was trying to protect you. From what? From knowing that my father is alive and doesn't want me? Because guess what, Mom? I know now anyway." The bitterness in her daughter's voice was like acid. Rachel had spent 15 years building a shield around Sophie's heart, protecting her from the pain of abandonment and rejection. Now that shield had been shattered, and the wounds beneath were raw and bleeding. "Who told you?" Rachel asked, though she already knew. "Does it matter? The point is, someone had to, because my own mother couldn't tell me the truth." Rachel slid down the door until she was sitting on the hallway floor. Through the walls, she could hear Sophie moving around, the sound of drawers opening and closing. What was she looking for? What was she doing? "Sophie, please open the door. We need to talk about this. I'm done talking." The finality in those words sent ice through Rachel's veins. She knew that tone, had heard it in her own voice at Sophie's age when she'd made decisions that couldn't be unmade. Inside her room, Sophie sat on her bed with her laptop open, staring at a Facebook page that had taken her 20 minutes to find. Jonathan Carter's profile was mostly private, but she could see enough. The expensive suits, the charity galas, the carefully curated life of Boston's elite. In several photos, he was with Amanda, the woman who had destroyed Sophie's world with surgical precision. They looked perfect together, wealthy, powerful, untouchable. There was no room in that pristine life for a teenage daughter who reminded them of mistakes and complications. Sophie scrolled through photo after photo, searching for any sign that this man might have thought about her over the years, any indication that he'd wondered about the child he'd left behind. But there was nothing. Just image after image of a life carefully constructed to exclude any messy reminders of his past. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Hey, heard about what happened at school. You okay?" Sophie stared at the message for a long time before deleting it without responding. What was the point? He'd already chosen his side, already decided that his family's approval was more important than their friendship. Another message, this time from an unknown number. "This is Amanda Carter. I hope our conversation today was helpful. Your father would like to meet with you tomorrow at 3 p.m. the Ritz-Carlton lobby. Don't tell your mother." Sophie read the message 3 times, her heart racing. He wanted to see her. After all these years, her father wanted to meet her. Maybe Amanda had been wrong about him not caring. Maybe there was an explanation, a reason he'd stayed away that made sense. She started to type a response, then stopped. Something about the message felt wrong. The tone was too formal, too controlling, and why wouldn't he want her mother to know? But the hope was stronger than the doubt. This was her chance to finally meet the man who'd been a ghost in her life for 15 years, to get answers to questions that had haunted her since childhood. "I'll be there," she typed back. Rachel had finally fallen asleep on the hallway floor when she was awakened by the sound of her daughter's door opening. It was 2:17 a.m. according to her phone. "Sophie," she called softly, but there was no answer. Rachel got to her feet, joints protesting from hours on the hard floor, and peered into her daughter's room. The bed was empty, the window open. Panic hit Rachel like a freight train. She ran to the window and looked out at the fire escape, but Sophie was already gone. Rachel's phone showed no missed calls, no texts, no indication of where her daughter might have gone. She called Sophie's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. "Sophie, baby, please call me. I know you're angry and you have every right to be. But please don't do anything dangerous. Come home and we'll talk. I'll tell you everything. I promise." But even as she left the message, Rachel knew it was too late. The careful walls she'd built around their life had finally collapsed, and Sophie was out there somewhere in the night. Angry and hurt, and making decisions that could destroy everything. Sophie had never been to the Ritz-Carlton before. The lobby was all marble and crystal, filled with the kind of understated luxury that whispered money, rather than shouting it. She felt ridiculously underdressed in her jeans and Cambridge prep sweatshirt, but she was beyond caring about appearances. At exactly 3 p.m., she saw him. Jonathan Carter looked exactly like his photos. Tall, distinguished, with those same blue eyes she saw in the mirror every morning. He was standing near the concierge desk, checking his watch with the impatience of a man accustomed to others conforming to his schedule. For a moment, Sophie just watched him. This was her father, the man whose DNA she carried, whose features she'd inherited, whose absence had shaped her entire life. He looked ordinary, wealthy, and powerful. Yes, but just a man, not the hero she'd imagined as a child, not the villain Amanda had painted him as, just a stranger who happened to share her blood. She walked toward him, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone in the lobby could hear it. "Mr. Carter." He turned, and she watched his face carefully, looking for any sign of recognition, any flicker of paternal love, or even curiosity. What she saw instead was shock, followed quickly by something that looked like fear. "You're Sophie. I'm your daughter." The words hung between them in the elegant lobby. Other guests moved around them, oblivious to the drama playing out in their midst. Jonathan looked around nervously. "You shouldn't be here. This isn't... We can't do this here." "Then where? When? I've been waiting 15 years to meet you. You don't understand. It's complicated. Everyone keeps saying that." Sophie's voice was rising, drawing stares from nearby guests. "My whole life is apparently complicated. But you know what's not complicated. You're my father, and you abandoned me." "Lower your voice," Jonathan hissed, grabbing her arm. "Do you have any idea who might be watching? Who might be listening?" Sophie jerked away from him. "I don't care who's watching. I want answers." "I can't give you answers, not here, not now." He pulled out his wallet and extracted several $100 bills. "Take this. Go home. Forget you ever saw me." The money fluttered to the marble floor as Sophie stared at him in disbelief. "You think you can buy me off? You think money fixes 15 years of abandonment? I'm trying to protect you." "From what?" "From knowing that my father is a coward who pays people to go away rather than deal with his responsibilities." The accusation hit its mark. Jonathan's face flushed red, and for a moment, Sophie saw something real in his eyes. Pain, regret, maybe even love. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. "You need to leave. Now." "No." Sophie's voice was deadly quiet. "I'm not leaving until you tell me why. Why you left my mother. Why you never tried to find me. Why you want nothing to do with me now. Because I can't." The words exploded out of him, loud enough to echo through the lobby. "Because having you in my life would destroy everything I've built. Because some mistakes can't be fixed, no matter how much you want them to be." The honesty was brutal and devastating. Sophie felt something inside her chest crack and crumble. This was it then. The truth she'd been seeking? She wasn't wanted. She was a mistake that needed to be hidden away. "I see," she said quietly. "Well, thank you for finally being honest." She turned to walk away, but Jonathan caught her arm again. "Sophie, wait, I didn't mean... You meant exactly what you said." She looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up at his face. "Let go of me." He released her immediately, and Sophie walked toward the lobby exit with her head held high. But inside, she was dying. Every step felt like walking through glass, every breath like swallowing razor blades. Behind her, Jonathan called her name, but she didn't turn around. She'd gotten her answers. They just weren't the ones she'd hoped for. Sophie didn't remember leaving the hotel or getting on the T. The next thing she knew, she was standing on the massive bridge, looking down at the dark water of the Charles River. The wind was cold against her face, cutting through her sweatshirt like ice. Her phone had been buzzing constantly. Calls from her mother, texts from school friends she'd thought had abandoned her, even messages from Marcus. But she'd turned off the sound hours ago. She didn't want to hear from anyone, didn't want to pretend that anything could be fixed with words. She thought about Amanda Carter's perfect smile as she delivered the news that shattered Sophie's world. She thought about her mother's lies, told with love, but devastating. Nonetheless, she thought about her father's face when he'd called her a mistake that couldn't be fixed. Most of all, she thought about how tired she was. Tired of being the scholarship kid who didn't belong. Tired of being the daughter nobody wanted. Tired of carrying the weight of other people's secrets and lies. The water below looked peaceful, final. Sophie climbed over the railing. Rachel's call to 911 came at 4:47 p.m., her voice breaking as she reported her daughter missing. The police officer who took the report was kind but practical. 15-year-olds ran away all the time, especially after family arguments. They'd keep an eye out, but Sophie would probably come home on her own once she cooled down. Rachel wanted to scream that they didn't understand, that Sophie wasn't just any teenager having a tantrum. She was a girl whose entire world had just collapsed, who'd discovered that every foundational truth of her life had been a carefully constructed lie. She'd spent the day calling everyone she could think of, Sophie's few remaining friends at Cambridge Prep, her old friends from public school, even the guidance counselor. No one had seen her. It was as if Sophie had simply vanished into the city. At 6:23 p.m., Rachel's phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. "Ms. Hayes, this is Dr. Sarah Chen at Massachusetts General Hospital. We have your daughter here." The world stopped. Rachel couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only grip the phone with white knuckles and wait for the words that would either save her or destroy her completely. Is she alive? She's alive. But she's in serious condition. You need to come immediately. The emergency room at Mass General was a controlled chaos of medical professionals moving with practiced urgency. Rachel ran through the automatic doors still wearing her cleaning uniform, not caring about the looks she received from the perfectly dressed families in the waiting area. "Sophie Hayes," she gasped to the receptionist. "My daughter, Sophie Hayes. Room 314, ICU. Take the elevator to the 3rd floor." The elevator ride was the longest minute of Rachel's life. When the doors opened, she saw Jonathan Carter standing in the hallway outside room 314, still in his expensive suit, but looking more disheveled than she'd ever seen him. "What are you doing here?" The words came out harsher than she'd intended. Jonathan turned, and she saw that his face was ravaged with guilt and fear. "I called the ambulance. I found her on the bridge." "What bridge? What happened?" "The massive bridge He swallowed hard. She was on the wrong side of the railing. The words hit Rachel like a physical blow. Her knees buckled, and she had to grab the wall for support. She tried to kill herself. A jogger called it in. "I was driving home from the office when I heard the sirens. I saw her on the bridge and, God, Rachel, I almost didn't stop. I almost kept driving, but he had stopped. Whatever his faults, whatever pain he'd caused, Jonathan had stopped and pulled their daughter back from the edge. How is she?" "Hypothermia, mostly. She was in the water for a few minutes before the rescue team got her out. The doctors say she'll be okay physically." "But," he trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Rachel pushed past him into the hospital room. Sophie lay unconscious in the narrow bed, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed with electronic precision. She looked impossibly young and fragile. Her dark hair spread across the white pillow like spilled ink. Rachel took her daughter's hand, noting how cold it still was despite the heated blankets. "Sophie, baby, I'm here." There was no response. Sophie's eyes remained closed, her breathing steady but artificially maintained by the machines around her. "The doctor said she might be unconscious for a while," Jonathan said quietly from the doorway. "The cold, the trauma, her body is shutting down to heal." Rachel didn't turn around. She couldn't look at him right now, couldn't process the complexity of emotions his presence brought up. All she could focus on was Sophie, On the steady rise and fall of her daughter's chest that meant she was still alive. "This is your fault," she said quietly. "I know. No, you don't know. You have no idea what you've done." Rachel's voice was steady, but underneath was a fury so deep it made her hands shake. "She worshipped you, even thinking you were dead. She made you into this perfect hero in her mind, and you called her a mistake." Jonathan moved closer to the bed. "I didn't mean..." "Yes, you did. You meant every word, just like you meant it 15 years ago when you disappeared without a trace. Rachel, please, let me explain." Before Jonathan could continue, the door opened and Dr. Chen entered with a small entourage of medical staff. She was a petite woman with kind eyes and the efficient manner of someone accustomed to delivering difficult news. "Ms. Hayes, I'm Dr. Chen. We spoke on the phone. How is she?" "Physically, she's stabilizing. The hypothermia was severe but not life-threatening. We're warming her gradually, and her vital signs are improving." "When will she wake up?" Dr. Chen glanced between Rachel and Jonathan, clearly trying to navigate the family dynamics she didn't understand. "That's harder to predict. The trauma wasn't just physical. Sometimes the mind needs time to process what the body has experienced. But she will wake up." "Yes, we believe so. But Ms. Hayes, when she does, she's going to need significant psychological support." "What happened today?" "This wasn't an accident." The words hung in the sterile air. Rachel nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. "We'll need to place her on a psychiatric hold once she's medically stable," Dr. Chen continued gently. "It's protocol for suicide attempts. She'll be evaluated and receive appropriate treatment." After the medical team left, Rachel and Jonathan sat in uncomfortable silence on opposite sides of Sophie's bed. The machines continued their electronic symphony, marking time in beeps and digital displays. "I need to ask you something," Rachel said finally. "Did Amanda have anything to do with this?" Jonathan's silence was answer enough. "What did she do?" "I don't know exactly, but she's been making calls, spreading rumors about Sophie at school. She hired investigators, found out about the scholarship." He ran his hands through his hair. "Amanda doesn't handle threats well." "Threats? Sophie is a 15-year-old girl. To Amanda, Sophie represents everything that could destroy the life we've built: the perfect marriage, the social standing, the carefully constructed image of success." Rachel stared at him across their daughter's unconscious form. "And what does Sophie represent to you, Jonathan?" The question caught him off guard. He looked down at Sophie, really looked at her, and Rachel saw something change in his expression. "She looks like you," he said quietly, "but she has my eyes." "That's not what I asked." Jonathan was quiet for a long time, watching the steady rhythm of Sophie's breathing. "She represents the biggest mistake of my life, not her existence. Leaving her, leaving you, choosing the easy path instead of the right one." Before Rachel could respond, her phone buzzed with a text message. The number was unfamiliar, but the message made her blood run cold. "Your daughter is awake now, but she won't be safe in that hospital forever. Accidents happen all the time in medical facilities. Meet me in the parking garage, level B2, in 10 minutes. Come alone, and bring all the evidence you've collected about my husband's business dealings. No police, or the next accident will be permanent." Rachel's hands began to shake as she read the message again. Amanda Carter had finally shown her true colors, and she was more dangerous than Rachel had ever imagined. "What is it?" Jonathan asked, noticing her reaction. Rachel looked at him, then at Sophie lying unconscious in the hospital bed, then back at the phone in her hands. Everything she'd fought for, everything she'd sacrificed, had led to this moment. Amanda wanted a trade, the evidence that could destroy Jonathan's empire in exchange for Sophie's safety. But Rachel had learned something important during her years of struggle and sacrifice. Sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to be willing to lose everything else. "I have to go," she said, standing up. "What? Where?" "Stay with her. Don't leave her alone. Not for a second." "Rachel, what's going on?" She looked back at Jonathan one last time, seeing the confusion and fear in those blue eyes that Sophie had inherited. "I'm going to end this," she said, "once and for all." The parking garage was a concrete maze of shadows and echoing footsteps. Rachel found Amanda Carter waiting by a black sedan on level B2, looking as perfectly composed as always despite the fact that she'd just threatened to murder a teenager in a hospital bed. "You came," Amanda said, as if she'd been expecting afternoon tea rather than an exchange of blackmail materials. How refreshing to deal with someone who understands the seriousness of the situation. "Let me make something clear," Rachel said, her voice deadly calm. "If you so much as breathe in the direction of my daughter again, I will destroy you, not your husband, not your social standing, you personally." Amanda smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Bold words from a cleaning lady. "Do you have what I asked for?" Rachel held up a flash drive. "Every document, every photo, every piece of evidence I've collected about Carter Enterprises' illegal activities. Everything that could send your husband to federal prison for the next 20 years. Excellent. Now hand it over, and we can all go back to our respective lives." "Not so fast." Rachel pocketed the drive. "First, you're going to call off whatever campaign you've been running against Sophie. No more rumors, no more social pressure, no more interference with her education. Done. The girl can finish her scholarship in peace. Second, you're going to stay away from both of us forever. No more threats, no more intimidation, no more games." "Of course." Rachel studied Amanda's face, looking for any sign of deception. What she saw there was something much worse than lies. She saw the patient satisfaction of a predator who had already won. "What aren't you telling me?" Rachel asked. Amanda's smile widened. "Oh, my dear Rachel, you still don't understand how this works, do you? I don't make deals with people like you. I simply take what I want." The sedan's doors opened, and two men stepped out, the same men who had threatened Rachel at the bus stop weeks ago. Before she could react, they had grabbed her arms and forced her into the back seat of the car. "You see," Amanda continued, sliding into the front passenger seat with elegant precision, "Sophie isn't the only one who can have accidents, and yours is going to look very much like a grieving mother who couldn't handle her daughter's suicide attempt." As the car pulled out of the parking garage and into the Boston night, Rachel realized that she had walked directly into Amanda's trap. The woman had never intended to honor any deal. She had simply wanted to get Rachel alone and vulnerable. But Rachel had one advantage that Amanda didn't know about. The flash drive in her pocket was empty. The real evidence was safely stored in a location that would automatically release everything to the FBI. If Rachel didn't check in within 24 hours, Amanda Carter thought she was playing chess. But Rachel had just changed the game to something much more dangerous. The Carter building looked different at night. The glass and steel monument to corporate power stood like a dark sentinel against the Boston skyline, its upper floors lit only by emergency lighting and the glow of the city below, as Amanda's sedan pulled into the underground garage. Rachel realized with cold certainty where this was all leading. "The top floor," Amanda said, as if reading her thoughts. "How poetic, don't you think? Where it all began 15 years ago, and where it will finally end tonight." Rachel was hauled from the car by Amanda's hired muscle, her arms still restrained as they moved toward the service elevator. The building was eerily quiet at this hour, their footsteps echoing through empty corridors that Rachel knew intimately from years of cleaning them. "You know," Amanda continued conversationally as they rode the elevator to the 45th floor, "I've always wondered what it would be like to throw someone from this height. The physics of it are quite fascinating." "You're insane," Rachel said. "Am I? Or am I simply practical?" Amanda checked her reflection in the polished elevator doors, smoothing an imaginary wrinkle from her coat. "You've become a problem that needs solving. Your daughter has become a problem that needs solving. Tonight, I solve both." The elevator opened onto the executive floor, but instead of stopping at Jonathan's office, they continued to the stairwell that led to the building's roof access. Rachel's heart pounded as she realized Amanda's true plan. This wasn't just about eliminating a threat. This was about sending a message that would terrorize Sophie into permanent silence. 20 floors below, Jonathan Carter paced the hallway outside Sophie's hospital room, his phone pressed to his ear as he left his fourth voicemail for Rachel. "Please call me back. Sophie's awake, and she's asking for you. The doctors say she's going to be okay. But Rachel, she needs you here. We both need you here." He hung up and stared at the phone, willing it to ring. Where could Rachel have gone? And why hadn't she returned any of his calls? Through the glass window of Sophie's room, he could see his daughter sitting up in bed, her eyes red from crying but alert and focused. She'd woken up an hour ago, confused and disoriented, but the first word out of her mouth had been "Mom." Jonathan had tried to explain that Rachel had stepped out, that she'd be back soon, but Sophie had seen right through the lie. She'd inherited more than just his eyes. She'd gotten his ability to read people, to see past comfortable deceptions to uncomfortable truths. "Where is she really?" Sophie asked when he entered the room. "I don't know," Jonathan admitted. "She got a text message and said she had to leave. She told me to stay with you." Sophie nodded slowly, processing this information with the same analytical mind that had earned her a scholarship to Cambridge Prep. "You're my father," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, and you've known about me for weeks." Jonathan sat down in the chair beside her bed, suddenly looking older than his 37 years. "I found out when your mother came to see me. I swear to you, Sophie, I never knew you existed before that. But when you did find out, you tried to make us go away." The accusation hung between them, simple and devastating in its truth. Jonathan had spent his entire adult life crafting careful responses to difficult questions, but faced with his daughter's direct honesty, all his practiced evasions crumbled. "Yes," he said quietly. "I was scared. Selfish. I thought I could protect the life I'd built by pretending you didn't exist. And now," Jonathan looked at this remarkable young woman who shared his DNA and Rachel's fierce intelligence, who'd inherited the best qualities of both her parents despite growing up with only one of them. "Now I know I was wrong about everything." Sophie studied his face with those unsettling blue eyes. "My mom's in trouble, isn't she?" Before Jonathan could answer, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Amanda's number. "Jonathan, darling." His wife's voice was sickeningly sweet. "I hope you're enjoying your little bonding session with your bastard daughter. Amanda, where are you?" "I'm exactly where I need to be, and so is Rachel Hayes." There was a pause, and Jonathan could hear wind in the background. "She's right here with me." "Actually, would you like to say goodbye?" Jonathan's blood turned to ice. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about cleaning up your mess, Jonathan. Permanently. The roof of your building offers such a spectacular view of the city. Almost makes you want to jump." "Amanda, don't do this. Whatever you're planning." "Oh, but I am doing it right now. Unless, of course, you'd like to join us. Bring the girl. Let's make this a proper family reunion." The line went dead. Jonathan stared at his phone, his mind racing through possibilities and discarding them just as quickly. Amanda had Rachel on the roof of the Carter building. She was threatening to kill her, and she wanted him to bring Sophie. "What did she say?" Sophie asked. Jonathan looked at his daughter, seeing Rachel's determination in the set of her jaw, her refusal to be intimidated by circumstances beyond her control. "My wife has your mother," he said simply. "She's going to kill her unless we go to her." Sophie was already pulling the IV from her arm. "Then we go." "Sophie, no. You just attempted suicide. You're in no condition. My mother is in danger because of me. Because of this whole mess with you and your psychotic wife." Sophie swung her legs over the side of the bed, ignoring the hospital gown and the concerned beeping of the monitors. "I'm not staying here while she dies because of something I caused." Jonathan saw himself in that moment. Not the polished executive he'd become, but the idealistic young man who'd fallen in love with a waitress and dreamed of changing the world. The man he'd buried under years of compromise and social expectations. "Okay," he said, "but we do this my way." The roof of the Carter building was a wind-swept expanse of concrete and mechanical equipment, surrounded by a low wall that offered breathtaking views of Boston and a straight drop to the street 45 floors below. Rachel stood near the edge, her hands zip-tied behind her back, while Amanda's 2 hired men flanked her like sentries. "You know," Amanda said, leaning against an air conditioning unit with casual elegance, "I've always found heights so clarifying. All the noise and confusion of daily life just falls away up here. You can see everything so clearly." "What I can see clearly is that you're a sick woman who gets off on controlling people," Rachel replied. Amanda laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "Control, oh my dear. This isn't about control. This is about survival. You and your daughter represent an existential threat to everything I've built. My marriage, my social position, my entire identity. So you decided to commit murder. I decided to solve a problem." Jonathan's bastard child was always going to be a complication. Better to eliminate the complication before it could do any real damage. Rachel tested the zip ties around her wrists, feeling for any weakness. The plastic was tight and professionally applied. But she'd learned a lot about improvisation during her years of struggle. What about Jonathan? Don't you think he'll figure out what you've done? Jonathan will mourn appropriately for the tragic loss of his former lover and her daughter. Then he'll move on. As he always does. As he did 15 years ago when his father convinced him to abandon you. The casual revelation hit Rachel like a physical blow. His father? Oh yes. Didn't you know? Jonathan didn't just decide to disappear on his own. Daddy Carter made it very clear what would happen if his son continued his association with the hired help. Disinheritance. Social exile. Complete destruction of the family name. Amanda's smile was sharp as a blade. Jonathan chose money over love, just like he's about to choose his wife over his bastard child. Before Rachel could process this completely, the roof access door burst open. Jonathan emerged first, followed immediately by Sophie, who was still wearing a hospital gown under Jonathan's suit jacket. "Well," Amanda said, straightening up with obvious pleasure. "Look what we have here, the whole happy family. Together at last." "Let her go, Amanda," Jonathan said, his voice carrying an authority Rachel had never heard before. "This is between you and me." "Oh, but it's not, darling. It's about all of us, the choices we make, the prices we pay." Amanda gestured toward Rachel. "Your little cleaning lady here has been quite the busy bee, collecting evidence about your business practices, tax evasion, money laundering, all sorts of federal crimes. I know about the offshore accounts," Jonathan said quietly. "I've known for years." Amanda's composure slipped for the first time. "What? Did you really think I was that oblivious? That I wouldn't notice my own wife embezzling millions from my company?" Jonathan moved closer, his voice gaining strength. "I know about every shell company, every fraudulent transaction, every illegal transfer you've made over the past 10 years. You're lying. The Cayman accounts under your maiden name, the property purchases in Switzerland, the art collection you've been building with laundered money." Jonathan's voice was steady, implacable. "I have documentation of everything, Amanda. Everything." Rachel watched Amanda's perfect facade cracking, revealing the desperate, trapped animal beneath. A cornered predator was the most dangerous kind. "Then you know you're just as guilty as I am," Amanda snarled. "You've been complicit in every single transaction. If I go down, you go down with me. Maybe, but I'm willing to pay that price now." Jonathan looked at Sophie, then at Rachel. "Some things are worth losing everything for." Amanda pulled a gun from her purse, the weapon looking incongruous in her manicured hands. "How touching, a deathbed conversion. But I'm afraid it's too late for redemption, Jonathan." She pointed the gun at Rachel's head. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to watch me kill your former lover and your bastard daughter. Then you're going to go back to being the perfect husband. And we're going to pretend none of this ever happened." "Mom?" Sophie started toward Rachel, but one of Amanda's men grabbed her arm. "Stay back!" Amanda's voice cracked like a whip. "Everyone stay exactly where they are, or I start shooting right now." The wind whipped across the rooftop, carrying with it the sounds of the city far below. Rachel could see the lights of their old neighborhood in Southie, could imagine their empty apartment where Sophie's textbook still lay scattered across the kitchen table. This was it then. This was how it ended. Not with the quiet dignity she'd hoped for, but with violence and hatred, and the bitter taste of dreams deferred too long. But as she looked at Sophie, brilliant, brave Sophie who'd risked everything to save her, Rachel realized something important. She'd won, despite Amanda's threats, despite Jonathan's abandonment, despite 15 years of struggle and sacrifice. She'd won the only thing that really mattered. She'd raised an extraordinary daughter who was loved and worthy of love, regardless of what her biological father chose to do about it. "Do it," Rachel said quietly, her eyes locked on Amanda's. "Pull the trigger, but know that it won't change anything. Sophie will still be Jonathan's daughter. She'll still be entitled to everything you've tried to keep from her, and the world will still know exactly what kind of monster you really are." Amanda's hand shook as she raised the gun. And in that moment of hesitation, everything changed. The moment Amanda's hand trembled, Sophie acted. Years of being underestimated had taught her to move when others expected stillness, to strike when others expected submission. She broke free from her captor's grip with a burst of desperate strength and threw herself at Amanda, catching the woman completely off guard. The gun went off, the shot echoing across the rooftop and out into the Boston night. but Sophie's tackle had sent Amanda's aim wide, the bullet shattering a window in the building across the street instead of finding Rachel's heart. "Sophie!" Rachel screamed as her daughter and Amanda struggled for control of the weapon. Jonathan moved at the same time, grabbing the nearest of Amanda's hired men, while the second one fumbled for his own gun. Years of tennis and sailing had kept Jonathan in better shape than his corporate lifestyle suggested. But it was pure desperation that gave him the strength to wrestle the larger man to the ground. On the other side of the rooftop, Sophie and Amanda rolled across the concrete, both fighting for the gun with savage intensity. Amanda might have been older and more experienced in cruelty, but Sophie had 15 years of her mother's fierce determination coursing through her veins. "You little bitch," Amanda snarled, her perfect composure finally shattered completely. "You think you can just waltz into my life and destroy everything I've built." "I never wanted to destroy anything," Sophie gasped, her hands locked around Amanda's wrists. "I just wanted to know who my father was." "Your father is a weak man who chose money over love 15 years ago," Amanda spat. "And he'll choose it again. You'll see." The gun was between them now, neither woman able to gain complete control. Rachel watched in terror as they struggled dangerously close to the rooftop's edge, the low wall that was all that separated them from a 45-story fall. Behind them, Jonathan had managed to subdue one attacker, but the second man had his gun drawn and was taking aim at Sophie. "No!" Rachel threw herself sideways, her hands still zip-tied behind her back, and managed to knock the gunman off balance just as he fired. The bullet went wild, and Rachel crashed to the concrete beside him. The gunman turned toward her, raising his weapon again. When the rooftop access door burst open and Boston police poured onto the scene, their own weapons drawn and voices shouting commands that cut through the wind. "BP Daft! Everyone on the ground now!" In the confusion that followed, Amanda made one last desperate play. She broke free from Sophie's grip and pointed the gun not at Rachel or Jonathan, but at her own temple. "Stay back!" she screamed at the approaching officers. "All of you, stay back, or I'll end this right here." The police froze, hands raised, weapons still drawn but not targeted. In the sudden stillness, Amanda's voice carried clearly across the rooftop. 15 years, she said, her perfect hair whipping in the wind, her designer dress torn and stained. 15 years I've been the perfect wife, the perfect hostess, the perfect accessory to your perfect life, Jonathan. "Amanda, please," Jonathan said quietly. "Put the gun down. We can work this out." She laughed, but it was the sound of something breaking. "Work it out. Like you worked it out when you abandoned your pregnant girlfriend. Like you worked it out when you let me handle all the dirty work of keeping your image clean. I never asked you to hurt anyone. You didn't have to ask." The words exploded out of her. "I saw what needed to be done, and I did it. The offshore accounts, the shell companies, the payments to make problems disappear. I did it all to protect you, to protect us." Rachel had managed to work one hand free from the zip ties, the plastic cutting into her wrist as she twisted. She could see Sophie slowly edging closer to Amanda, using the woman's focus on Jonathan as cover. "You didn't do it to protect me," Jonathan said, his voice steady, despite the gun pointed at his wife's head. "You did it to protect the lifestyle you wanted, the social position, the money, the power. They're the same thing." Amanda's voice cracked. "Without all of that, what are we? What am I?" The question hung in the night air like a challenge to the universe itself. Rachel found herself thinking about her own answer to that question, about who she was when stripped of everything except her love for her daughter. "You're the woman I married," Jonathan said quietly. "The woman I thought I loved, before I remembered what love actually felt like." It was the wrong thing to say. Rachel saw Amanda's expression change, saw the last vestiges of sanity leave her eyes as she realized that Jonathan was choosing Rachel and Sophie over her, over everything they'd built together. "Then we'll all go together," Amanda whispered, and turned the gun toward Sophie. But Sophie was ready. As Amanda's hand moved, Sophie lunged forward, not trying to grab the gun, but simply to push Amanda backward, away from everyone else. The two women hit the low wall at the edge of the rooftop with devastating force. For a moment, they teetered there, balanced between the building and the empty air beyond. Then Amanda fell. Sophie managed to grab the edge of the wall, her feet scrabbling for purchase on the smooth concrete. The gun clattered across the rooftop. forgotten in the struggle for survival. Sophie. Rachel ran to the edge, her freed hand reaching for her daughter. Jonathan was there too, grabbing Sophie's arms and hauling her back onto solid ground. Below them, 45 stories down, Amanda's body lay motionless on the sidewalk, surrounded by the growing crowd of emergency responders and curious onlookers. The aftermath was a blur of police statements, medical examinations, and media attention that threatened to overwhelm them all. The story had everything the Boston press loved: wealth, scandal, family secrets, and a dramatic conclusion atop one of the city's most prominent buildings. But 3 weeks later, as Rachel sat in the waiting room of the psychiatric facility where Sophie was receiving treatment, the media circus felt like something that had happened to other people, in a different lifetime. "She's doing much better," Dr. Martinez said, settling into the chair across from Rachel. The suicide attempt was a cry for help, as much as a genuine desire to die. Now that the family secrets are out in the open, Sophie is processing her emotions much more healthily. When can she come home? Soon. A few more days. Maybe a week. But Rachel, when she does come home, things are going to be different. She's not the same girl who went to that bridge. She's been through trauma that most adults couldn't handle. Rachel nodded. She'd been preparing for this conversation, for the reality that her daughter had been forever changed by the events of the past month. "There's something else," Dr. Martinez continued. "Sophie has been asking to see her father, not just once or twice. She's been quite insistent about it. Has he been here? Every day since she was admitted, he sits in the hallway for hours, even though she hasn't been ready to see him yet. But yesterday, something changed. She said she wants to talk to him." Rachel felt a complex mix of emotions: protectiveness, fear, and something that might have been hope. "And you think that's a good idea?" "I think Sophie needs to process her relationship with Jonathan on her own terms. She spent 15 years with an idealized image of a dead father, then had that destroyed by the reality of a living one who disappointed her. Now she needs to figure out who he actually is, separate from both the fantasy and the disappointment." An hour later, Rachel watched through the observation window as Jonathan sat across from Sophie in the facility's family meeting room. They weren't touching, weren't even sitting particularly close, but there was something in their posture that spoke of genuine communication. "She looks like you," a voice said behind her. Rachel turned to find Jonathan standing in the hallway, his expensive suit replaced by jeans and a sweater that made him look younger, more like the college student she'd fallen in love with. "How did it go?" she asked. "Better than I expected. Harder than I hoped." He moved to stand beside her at the window, watching Sophie as she spoke with Dr. Martinez. "She asked me why I stayed away." "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That I was scared. That I chose the easy path instead of the right one. That I let my father convince me that loving you would destroy my life, when it turns out that not loving you actually did destroy it." Rachel studied his profile, looking for signs of the manipulative businessman who'd tried to buy her silence. What she saw instead was exhaustion, regret, and something that looked like genuine remorse. "She also asked me what I want to happen now," Jonathan continued. "And I told her that's not up to me, that I gave up the right to make those decisions 15 years ago." He turned to face Rachel fully. "I told her that whatever relationship we have going forward, if we have one at all, has to be something she chooses, not something I demand or you allow out of guilt." It was the right answer, Rachel realized. The answer that put Sophie's needs ahead of everyone else's wants and fears. "The FBI is going to want to talk to you," she said, "about Amanda's financial crimes, about Carter Enterprises. I know. My lawyers say I'll probably face charges, prison time, most likely." Jonathan's voice was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather. "The company is finished. Everything I built, everything I thought mattered. It's all gone. I'm sorry." He looked at her in surprise. "Are you?" Rachel considered the question seriously. Was she sorry that Jonathan was facing consequences for his choices? Was she sorry that his empire was crumbling? "I'm sorry that it took this long for you to figure out what actually matters," she said finally, through the window. They watched Sophie laugh at something Dr. Martinez had said. It was the first time Rachel had seen her daughter laugh since before the confrontation with Amanda, and the sound was like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "She's extraordinary," Jonathan said quietly. "You did an incredible job raising her." We're not done yet. She's got a lot of healing to do, a lot of growing up still ahead of her. I'd like to be part of that. If you'll let me. Rachel turned away from the window to face the man who'd shaped her life through both his presence and his absence. He wasn't the hero she'd once imagined him to be, but he wasn't the villain she'd later convinced herself he was either. He was just a person who'd made terrible choices and was finally ready to face the consequences. That's not my decision to make, she said. It's Sophie's. And what about us? What about what we had? The question she'd been dreading finally hung between them. Rachel thought about the 19-year-old girl who'd loved him desperately, who dreamed of a life they might build together. That girl was gone, shaped by 15 years of struggle and sacrifice into someone stronger, but also more careful with her heart. We're Sophie's parents, she said simply. That's what we are now. That's what we'll always be. Everything else, we'll figure out as we go. It wasn't the declaration of love he might have hoped for, but it wasn't a rejection either. It was a door left open, a possibility to be explored when the wounds had healed, and the ground beneath their feet felt solid again. 6 months later, Sophie graduated from Cambridge Preparatory Academy as valedictorian. She gave a speech about resilience, about the difference between the families we're born into and the families we choose, about finding strength in unexpected places. Rachel sat in the audience, wearing a dress she'd bought specifically for the occasion, watching her daughter accept awards and scholarship offers from universities across the country. Beside her, Jonathan applauded with tears in his eyes, proud of a daughter he was still learning to know. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain, but no longer shrouded in lies and secrets. They were a family now, unconventional, complicated, still healing, but a family nonetheless. And for the first time in 15 years, that felt like enough.